many thanks for being on the show today. And Baba here has already stand by to join us to explain and to take us into the talking about global job inequality. A very good day to you, sir. Baba here.
Yeah, hi. How are you, Olamileko? It's a pleasure to be with you.
I'm so glad to see you in a new look, in a new place, in a new address. Great to see you once again, Baba here.
Thank you. It's been a while.
Exactly. So let's start the discussion earnest. First and foremost, what is your reaction to the just concluded Global Labour Conference GLMC in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia? What is your reaction to it? I know you guys must have been in the know of it, but what is your reaction to it?
Well, first and foremost, thanks. I think the Global Labour Jobs Conference is important, but it's also something to be careful about because it represents something we have seen in different aspects of international life now, where the multilateral space is being constrained. You have the kind of privatization of the multilateral space, and then with some countries also stepping in. So, for example, you have the World Economic Forum, where all heads of state all go every January and all that. You have this global labor market conference and all that, which is organized by the Saudi government, the Saudi Ministry of Human Resources and Social Development, along with private sector players. So these don't have the kind of multilateral ethos that United Nations bodies have. But then they now pretend to occupy those spaces. So these places open room for private sector players, including philanthropic capitalists, foundations, including corporations, to shape global policy, and it's dangerous. But yeah, as you know, even biblically, the devil was wrong sometimes, was right. Then we now add Ajasa to it. So yes, of course, So there are things that came out from it that like the issue of the global job gap and all that. But statistics is not everything. It's also like, where is this meant to take us? What are the interests driving such analysis?
Now, when you talk about interest, it has been established, even at the conference, they established that right now, it is not just the statistics, because the statistics is very stark, it's very worrying. But the question is, this 300 million disparity that has been found, what will now be the fate of this set of people? Because if you take it back home here in Nigeria, we are part of that 300 million. We have youth unemployment in Nigeria. We have youth unemployment across Africa. So where does it take us to? Because even though it has been discovered, where does it take us to in understanding what has really happened to the global collective effort to address unemployment across the world?
Very good question. There's this saying that the only thing worse than being exploited, having your labor power exploited within a capitalist economy, which is what the worldwide economy is right at the moment. The only thing worse than being exploited is not being exploited at all.
I get you coming.
Yeah, because that means you don't then get money to purchase commodities in what is a commodity economy. So to that extent, the unemployment is a major problem for millions of people, as you have mentioned, which will come back to later.
Exactly.
But I think that what we should be looking at, amongst other things even right now, is redistribution of wealth. Yes. Social safety nets. Because look, even in the so-called 30 golden years of capitalism, which was between World War II and the 1970s, where you had, some would say, full employment. There was never 100% employment. But that was also the period where unemployment benefits came up. A number of people don't know the story behind that UB40, that is that
Exactly.
in those days, earlier in Charlie Land, the then disunited kingdom, so to speak, if you are unemployed, you fill Form 40 to get your unemployment benefit. So that's the UB unemployment benefit from 40. But you mostly get unemployment benefits in a number of advanced capitalist countries, despite the attacks on the welfare state over the last couple of decades. But in countries like, in African countries especially, but in the global south countries generally, and Nigeria in particular here, people don't get unemployment benefits. People fall through the cracks, then you have the informal economy, people, trying to survive somehow anyhow, or resting on informal networks of family and friends and all that. And these are not only economically damaging, but also psychologically damaging to the workforce. So we need to push for radical reforms, but we should also have no illusions that these reforms will give a lasting solution. So we also need to go to the roots of the problem and take a roots and stem and everything, a systemic approach.
Exactly.
To making life better.
Thank you very much, Baba. And one thing that I've said that really attracts me to the next question is that the conference in Riyadh agreed and acknowledged that there are structural barriers. And most time when we ask, what are these structural barriers, which some of them you have been mentioning in your conversation right now, we still need to understand what this structural barrier has become, to the point that the global entity themselves, they are even confused to a level. And that's why such conferences are not even in short, because we are at several conferences and many more will still come this year. So what was those structural barriers from your own angle that we can pinpoint to?
Thank you. I also like your highlighting from my angle, and because there are structural constraints and there are structural constraints. There are the structural constraints that those at Riyadh will choose not to see because it is inconvenient for them. And these are actually the most fundamental structural constraints. And what are those? The most fundamental structural constraint is that the capitalist economy is designed to ensure the maximization of profits for a handful of people. There was this thing during Occupy Wall Street that they were talking of the 1% versus the 99%. It's even like the 0.0001%.
That's strong.
Yeah, because look at it. For the first time in history, you have so many what they now call centi-billionaires. People that have over 100 billion US dollars. In fact, for the first time in history, somebody crossed the bar of going into 400 billion US dollars. Elon Musk. That's part of what is doing him gatti. You understand?
Exactly.
I mean, this was something unheard of before. So you see, a few people getting much richer than what they will ever need for generations to come. And then so many more people being poor. Not even, but the capitalist system is not concerned with whether people are employed or not. Or it's concerned about how those few get richer. So, and the thing now is, capitalism also goes with technological development.
Very well.
Part of an increasing productivity. So a lot of products cannot be produced more with less people. And for capital, also now with artificial intelligence and all that, so that the mass of these millions are what the Brazilian political economist Rojano described as the marginal mass. They are like excess, or what centuries earlier Karl Marx described as the industrial reserve army. And they also play a role in being used to push down wages. Because the capitalists can always point out when they give you one kind of amount as wages, if you don't want to collect the tender, you know how many people are queuing up to collect that half a loaf that you want to refuse. So it is also used as a whip to discipline those that are working to accept as minimum as possible. So the structural the main structural constraints is the profit motive. Is that the system puts profit first before people and even before the planet. It's not even just about jobs. For the first time in history, we have surpassed more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial global temperature. The way things are going, humans, our species will be extinct in just a few decades. But the rationality of capitalism is profit. It cannot even pull itself back to address this. So that's the most fundamental structural constraint on jobs, on the climate, on the earth, on human life.
Having said that, I also understand and acknowledge, this conference brought some facts out, even though they may not have the entire power to address some of the issue. They said something, from the Riyadh conference, they said, this crisis that is upcoming is far above social and economic crisis that the world will not be able to contain, because the millions of the reserve army you pointed out, they are huge. They have said in the next 10 years, 1.5 billion people will be looking for a job. With this far-reaching social and economic crisis at hand now, what else do you think we can do? Particularly, even all these conferences that are providing one or two solutions, but we need concrete and proactive solutions to this issue. What's your take on that?
Very good question. What I want to point out is, yes, they are right, but what is their fear? Their fear is not because of concern for those people that would be jobless or that are already jobless and maybe more that will join them. Their concern is that, hey, with this kind of thing, they can go gas.
Seriously.
Their concern is the possible revolutionary, explosive situation that their system is creating. Look at it all over the world, all over history. Since 1789 in France, unemployment and poverty and all that was what led to that explosion. You look at several other things, and that's why you see that often people, rebellions, uprisings, even though they have their own logic, they often go with periods of economic downturn that affects millions of people. Look at it, during the Great Depression, look at the mass waves of hunger marches, general strikes. Look at what happened in the wake of the 2008 global financial crisis. That was what led to Occupy Wall Street, the Arab Spring, even in Nigeria, Occupy Nigeria, the January uprising, and so on and so. So that is their fear. That is their fear.
Very interesting.
So for all this to be focused.
Exactly.
What is to be done.
Exactly. We will soon get to that level. But I'm just highlighting some of the arguments, some of the counter arguments that was brought out from the conference, because we need to highlight that so that our viewers can understand the angle that the conference went and the angle that we're also taking, so that we can address the challenge. One of the issues they also pinpoint was that technology advancement, climate change is an issue. And I see that nobody can isolate that from the current challenges that we are faced today. What is the way forward in this regard? Technology advancement, climate adaptation, job inequality, gender issues, they are all infused as one of the arguments put forward at the conference in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
The thing is we have to put the people and the planet over profit. And that is something that the corporations and the big capitalists will never do. Except if they are forced to, then they can give concessions. But forcing them to do so it's not even about just asking for that. You have to ask for more than that. And we might win more than that but it is the balance of forces that determines what we eventually win. I'll give concrete examples so that what I'm saying in abstract becomes clear.
Exactly.
And I want to relate it to then what has happened recently. So I'll look at two moments in history. In 2010, I did point out my concerns at a global conference that took place in Berlin, that the global financial crisis that year was the worst since the Great Depression. But while the Great Depression led to the emergence of welfare states, like the unemployment benefit I mentioned, free health, and in the West, then later, for a short period, in the global South, particularly Africa, that decolonized pretty late, you even had the intervention state, what they call the development, developmental state. But after the global financial crisis, what happened? They insisted that the solution was more of the same thing that caused the problem in the first place, which was liberalization, deregulation, privatization, and so on and so forth. And you know what I saw as the difference in both periods? In the wake of the Great Depression, workers' organizations, including trade unions, the youth and women and all that, they demanded for an end to capitalism. They did not just demand it, they fought for this. People might not know that in the United States, or the CIO, that was when the CIO was from Central Industrial Organization, Congress of Industrial Organization. They fought, they demanded in the UK, you had what they call hunger marches and all that. So it was out of fear that these people will overthrow our system, especially like what happened earlier in Russia in 1970. Then the capitalists decided to give those concessions. You understand?
Yeah, exactly.
But that except we change the whole system, we still keep having the problem. But the thing is, we will change that only when we mobilize enough strength and also deepen clarity on that. But that must be our aim and goal. But if we don't even fight for that, we cannot even gain concessions. Although our aim must be beyond concession. And then I summed it up at that conference with an analogy. Or is it
illustration?
Whatever they do, call it.
Illustration.
Correct. And I was like, the situation is like this. If you are in hell and you try to negotiate with the devil that this place is too hot, devil will know that this one is not serious, so we don't take you seriously. You know. But if you fight like hell to get out of hell, even if you don't have enough power to succeed in getting out of hell, liver of devil self go court say, this one won't leave. The devil will be ready to negotiate with you that, okay, I'll give you a corner with a condition.
Exactly. Seriously.
You know, but the thing is, even the unions and all that, they are negotiating on the basis of the point of departure of the class we are fighting against. We can't get anywhere with that. Exactly. We need to go beyond reforms. We need to make clearly revolutionary demands.
Exactly. And talking about
that way we can win reforms that are anti-reform.
Exactly, comrade. Now, talking about reform, at the same conference, organizations such as Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, EU, World Bank, AU, UN, all of them were there, and they all agree one thing. They all agree that to tackle this problem require not just a single action, but a collective action. And that collective action, according to them, is very critical. From what we have said so far, the angle of that critical look at this problem, is it the angle of just, let us just romance this issue, let's just talk about it, release some funds for international invention, and it end that way? Is that just the angle they are looking at? Because this kind of conference are not in short supply across the world.
You have hit the nail on the head there too. These kind of conferences are not in short supply. And I'm happy you started also pointing out OECD, which is also known as the club of rich countries. Then EU and all this. Talk is cheap. To be fair to some of them, as individuals, they could be good people, they could even have good intention. But the system is shaped in ways and manners that it cannot but bring about where we are. There could be some amendments, but even those amendments, it is not given out of benevolence. Those are given as reform, as concessions where they have been won. It's just like in Nigeria then, it was after the anti-SAP revolt of May 1989 that you saw Babangida giving SAP relief.
Exactly.
You know, even things like when you have palliative, even though now the palliative you see them more in the warehouses of the politicians. It is when they see that people are rising. So all those grammar, those organizations are saying, some have good intent, but I can't remember when, I think it was who said that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. There are some that know that they are just playing hanky-panky with everybody's head, but there are a few good-minded people. But the problem is more systemic than just about whether they have good intentions or not.
Now, talking about systemic now, which you have point me to the next question. You know, the global world is systemic. It also has a systematic way of getting things done. And we also discovered that some of these international organizations, they have good intentions from individual perspective of who head them, who is working there. But at the end of the day, the generality of it is that the broader perspective that who hold this institution to the jugular are much more interested in what comes to them than to the general public. Now, let's now step this discussion down home to Africa. In recent time, we have also seen the upsurge in unemployment challenges and the rest of them. And what do you make of it? Although you have been far away from home, but I know you are always on Nigerian stories, Nigerian activities, or the generality of African challenges. How do you see it? Looking side by side with what the World Bank have said about job disparity and inequality. And when you talk about inequality, Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, is guilty of this.
The ruling class in sub-Saharan Africa, along with the forces of imperialism, are guilty of it. The working class people are the victims of their policies, but we are not only or mainly victims. We also have power. We have power in our numbers. We have power in the roles we play in the production process. So what I would say in this regard and with Africa is that we started up with some disadvantages, and I have written about this in a couple of places, and I even spoke just now about how Africa was the last continent to be decolonized. For people, and then when people just talk of global south, third world, people don't, there are some things that are not in our minds. For example, the period of decolonization in Africa was like 125 to 150 years after the period of decolonization in Latin America. Then Asia, between the two world wars, a number of Asian countries that started being decolonized, and there were several that were even, not colonies by the time of the Second World War, like in Africa, where essentially it was only Ethiopia that was not colonized, and even that, the encroachment of Italy. And to cut a long story short, this made us to lose out of the window of the concessions I spoke to earlier. That period between 1945 and 1970, Africa became decolonized only in the 60s, which gave just one out of those three so-called 30 great golden years of capitalism. And you can see that within that period, in the first 15 years of decolonization of Africa, there were sharp increases in the rate of expenditure, funding of, and outcomes, palpable outcomes in health, in education, and so on and so forth. So Africa needs a second liberation. And that second liberation can be led and won only by the working class people themselves for themselves. Because the ruling class in Africa is hand in glove in every way particular with the forces of imperialism. They might have some few skirmishes about, no, we can't talk, but they are 5 and 6. So we need to deepen class consciousness, build revolutionary independent organization of working class people and youths, and fight to win the second liberation of Africa as part of a global anti-capitalist revolution to build a better world and in fact to save this world from extinction.
Thank you so much, Comrade. I really love the last part of your statement. We need to rebuild Africa. We need to restore back Africa to the dignity, and that means Africa needs a second liberation from imperialism and the rest of them. Now, let's take a look at least a light solutions or a hard one, I would say, because if I say light solution, at the Riyadh conference, they have profiled some light solutions which may not be that too convenient for some people. But let's take a look at solutions to these challenges. In your own view, one of the key solutions that the conference made was that they must invest in education. They must invest in the youth training and capacity building. They must also invest in the area of gender inequality by ensuring that equality comes to the table of gender. What do you have to say about that? These are not lacking, but we still need to talk about this as way of solution.
The issue of gender equity and the world of war. I'll talk in general and then I'll also make some specific. One, I mean, 75%, globally speaking, 75% of men of working age and all that have work, but it's only 47% for women. So already you see that gap. And even of those 37, you have what we call feminization of poverty. And it takes several shapes. You have a higher percentage or proportion of women in the informal economy. And even in the formal sector, you have large number of women in so-called feminine jobs, like in nursing, in teaching, and things like that. And meanwhile, even in those sectors where women are more, you have a larger proportion of men at the top. So like you see, nursing, for example, over 70% of nurses are women. But when you look at the top rank, even when you look at the unions, most times the presidents and general secretaries of the union where over 70% of its members are women are men. So then we come to the issue of gender pay gap. Generally, women earn 20% less than men, even in several European countries. I remember in 2018 or 2019, the Global Trade Union Federation I work with, we helped organize or support the organizing by our affiliates in Scotland, where you had a gender pay, you had a strike action to address the gender pay gap. Women went those, and men supported them. And this is very important. Some people see the issue of gender as just about women. No. We as men, working class activist men, have to equally be feminists. We all must be feminists. You know, we must all be feminists. So I will say that it is important to take steps in it. Now, some quick, concrete steps in that regard could be ensuring more countries endorse the Convention 190 against violence at the workplace, women are most affected, and address issues like gender pay gap and so on and so forth.
Now, the interesting comrade, now before I let you go, because time is already running out, the issue of minimum wage enforcement and the marketplace policy, I mean labor marketplace policy is global. it's not only in Nigeria that the NLC will be fighting the government over and want to increase minimum wage. It is a global issue, and they also address it. At the conference, they made mention that one of the challenges of the world is that the labor market enforcement of minimum wage is drastically, having a very wide gap because most countries are not pushing for this. So in this regard, is it a solution or a way of solutions to this particular challenge that the conference also addressed?
Well, national minimum wage is an LMI, a labor market institution, and it is meant to cut down on. It's meant to avoid a situation where workers lose their purchasing power as inflation flows. What I would suggest, and strongly so, is one, that we should have cost of living adjustment on an annual basis, so that we have a sliding scale between the minimum wage and consequential agreement. That is the norm in most countries in the world now. It's not that you now be waiting every 5 years, because we keep losing money. What we can get as minimum wage in Nigeria now, it keeps reducing. Because it's by the time you will be now negotiating, and negotiation now, government will try cut it. So there should be a sliding scale that this year, inflation rate went up this way or what have you. Employers should also then raise by that. But just quickly on the issue of jobs, one thing I want to emphasize is that because people look at the issue of jobs of we need to get everybody working and all that. The thing is, we need to even abolish work. There's no need for human beings to work the way we are working. With AI and all that. The billionaires don't work. It's their money that they say their money work for them. There's more than enough for everybody in the world to live a better life without what the anthropologists describe as bullshit jobs. In 2018 in his book. And John Maynard Keynes, who many people will know for his theory of aggregates,
exactly.
Demand. In 1930, he wrote that by year 2000, how his projection was that by year 2000, the working day would be not more than 15 hours. Working week. So that people will have time to just leisure. Because there will be automation would have developed. People don't need to work on this 15 hours. But people are still working 40 hours doing bullshit jobs today. Why? Meanwhile, some billionaires will just be going from yacht to this and that and all. They say they are working their computer, giving orders. Meanwhile, they are enjoying their life. So people will work, especially in some places like Lagos, some would have woken up by 4 a.m. to get to work by 8. They will leave home, they will go. What? That is not living now. No. 15 hours, that was what he said in 1930. So there's no basis. We need to abolish, but to do this, we need to change the system. A lot of the work that is being done is bullshit jobs. It's about social control. It's about a few people squeezing out profit, squeezing out surplus value, and squeezing out the very essence of our lives from the body, the soul, the spirit of 99% of the population. And that has to change.
Exactly.
To change that, we need a revolution for total liberation.
I think to end this discussion today, I will quickly tell Comrade that one of the solutions that the conference addressed to, very close to revolution or very close to something close that will allow for a feedback, was that they call for social dialogue. The conference, at the end of the day, World Bank, Saudi Arabian government, EU, OECD, they all call for social dialogue. Do you agree with them on social dialogue?
No scope.
Anyway,
the problem is not with social dialogue. It is, they say, what is after 5, well, that is not the actual translation for the modern time. I mean, what is after 6 is more than 7. Now, scope. When they say social dialogue, they are just saying that, look, kulu temper. There's nothing wrong with engaging dialogue, but we need much more than that.
Exactly.
We need a revolutionary transformation of society.
Amen.
To build, social transformation. The socialist society is what we need to change this. Not the kind of state capitalist monstrosity we had behind the Iron Curtain in Eastern Europe, but a liberated society where we really live in harmony with nature, you know, to the fullness, to reach our fullness of potential as human beings.
Thank you so much, Comrade. Comrade Baba Ye has been my guest today. Thank you for being on the show. Don't very soon I will call you. Know there are raging issues on the global market, particularly issues of job, issue of inequality, child labor. They are all there on the global scale, and World Bank and the rest of international bodies are taking practical steps to ensure that this comes to flow. And that's why I have to bring someone like you who is on the international scale to also help us look at this issue. Baba Aye, thank you so much. We hope to call you soon.
It's a pleasure, Lamine. My regards.
All right, sir. Thank you.